The Amiga 500, also known as the A500, was the first low-end Commodore Amiga 16/32-bit multimedia home personal computer. It was announced at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in January 1987, at the same time as the high-end Amiga 2000, and competed directly against the Atari 520. Before Amiga 500 was shipped, Commodore suggested that the list price of the Amiga 500 was $595 and 95 cents without a monitor. At delivery in October 1987, Commodore announced that the Amiga 500 would carry a $699 per hour £499 list price. In Europe, the Amiga 500 was released in May 1987. In the Netherlands, the A500 was available from April 1987 for a list price of HFL $14.99. The Amiga 500 represented a return to Commodore's roots by being sold in the same mass retail outlets as the Commodore 64, to which it was a spiritual successor, as opposed to the computer store-only Amiga 1000. The original Amiga 500 proved to be Commodore Euro unregistered trademark's best-selling Amiga model, enjoying particular success in Europe. Although popular with hobbyists, arguably its most widespread use was as a gaming machine, where its advanced graphics and sound were of significant benefit. Amiga 500 eventually sold 6 million units worldwide. Releases: in October 1989, the Amiga 500 dropped its price from £499 GBP to £399 and was bundled with the Batman pack in the United Kingdom. This price drop helped Commodore to sell more than 1 million Amiga 500s in 1989. In late 1991, an enhanced model known as the Amiga 500 Plus replaced the standard Amiga 500 in some markets. It was bundled with the Cartoon Classics pack in the United Kingdom at £399. The Amiga 500 series was discontinued in mid-1992, replaced by the similarly specified and priced Amiga 600, although this new machine had originally been intended as a much cheaper budget model, which would have been the A300. In late 1992, Commodore released the A-Euro next generation Euro Amiga 1200, a machine closer in concept to the original Amiga 500, but featuring significant technical improvements. Despite this, neither the A1200 nor the A600 replicated the commercial success of its predecessor as, by this time, the popular market was definitively shifting from the home computer platforms of the past to commodity Wintel PCs and the new low-cost Macintosh Classic, LC and SI models. Description: outwardly resembling the Commodore 128, the Amiga 500 houses the keyboard and CPU in one shell, unlike the Amiga 1000. It utilizes a Motorola 68000 microprocessor running at 7.15909 MHz or 7.09379 MHz. The CPU is 32-bit internally, but uses a 16-bit data bus and 24-bit address bus, providing a maximum of 16 megabytes of address space. The earliest Amiga 500 models used nearly the same OCS chipset as the Amiga 1000, so graphics can be displayed in multiple resolutions and color depths, even on the same screen. Resolutions vary from 320A, 200 to 640A, 200 for NTSC and 320A, 256 to 640A, 256 for PAL. The system uses planar graphics, with up to 5-bit planes allowing 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 color screens, from a palette of 4096 colors. 2 special graphics modes are also available: Extra Half Bright, which uses a 6-bit plane as a mask to cut the brightness of any pixel in half, and Hold and Modify, which allows all 4096 colors to be used on screen simultaneously. Later revisions of the chipset are PAL-NTSC switchable in software. The sound chip produces 4 hardware mixed channels, 2 to the left and 2 to the right, of 8-bit PCM at a sampling frequency of up to 28 kHz. Each hardware channel has its own independent volume level and sampling rate, and can be designated to another channel where it can modulate both volume and frequency using its own output. With DMA disabled, it's possible to output with a sampling frequency up to 56 kHz. There's a widely known trick to output sound with 14-bit precision too that can be combined to output 14-bit 56 kHz sound. The stock system comes with Amiga OS version 1.2 or 1.3 and 512 kilobytes of chip RAM, one built-in double-density floppy disk drive that is completely programmable and can read 720 kilobytes IBM PC disks, 880 kilobytes standard Amiga disks, and up to 984 kilobytes using custom formatting drivers. Despite the lack of Amiga 2000 compatible internal expansion slots, there are many ports and expansion options. There are two Atari 2600 DE9M sockets for joysticks or mice, stereo audio. There is a floppy drive port for daisy chaining up to 3 extra floppy disk drives via an EB23F connector. The then standard RS-232 serial port and Centronics parallel port are also included. The power supplies. The system displays video in analog RGB 50 Hz PAL or 60 Hz NTSC through a proprietary DB23M connector and in NTSC mode. The line frequency is 15,750 Hz sync for standard video modes, which is compatible with NTSC television and CVBS RGB video, but out of range for most VGA-compatible monitors. While a multisync monitor is required for some of the higher resolutions. This connection can also be gen-locked to an external video signal. The system was bundled with an RF adapter to provide output on televisions with a coaxial input, while monochrome composite video is available via an RCA connector. There is also a Zorro 2-bus expansion on the left side. Peripherals such as a hard drive can be added via the expansion slot and are configured automatically by the Amiga's auto-config standard, so that multiple devices do not conflict with each other. Up to 8 MB of a Euro fast RAM can be added using the side expansion slot. The Amiga 500 has a trapdoor slot on the underside for an upgrade of 512 kilobytes of RAM. The extra RAM is classified as fast RAM, but is sometimes referred to as slow RAM since due to the design of the expansion bus it is actually on the chipset bus. Such upgrades usually include a battery-backed real-time clock. All versions of the A500 can have the additional RAM configured as chip RAM by a simple hardware modification, which involves fitting a later model Agnes chip. Likewise, all versions of the A500 can be upgraded to 2 MB chip RAM by fitting the 8372B Agnes chip and adding additional memory. The Amiga 500 also sports an unusual feature for a budget machine, socketed chips, which allow easy replacement of defective chips. The CPU can be directly upgraded to a 68010 or to a 68020, 68030, or 68040 via the side expansion slot, or by removing the CPU and plugging the CPU expansion card in the CPU socket. In fact, all the custom chips can be upgraded to the Amiga enhanced chipset versions. The case is made from ABS plastics which may become brown with time. This may be reversed by using the public domain chemical mixer ETRO Bright, though without a clack coat to block oxygen, the brown coloring will return. Whenever the computer is powered on, a self-diagnostic test is run that will show any failure with a specific color, where green means no chip RAM found or is damaged, red means bad kickstart ROM, yellow means mostly a bad CPU or a bad Zorro expansion card. Blue means custom chip problem, light green means CIA problem, light gray means that the CIA might be defective, black stripes means ROM or CIA problem, black means really basic problem. The keyboard LED uses blink codes. 1 blink means the keyboard ROM has a checksum error, 2 blinks means RAM failure, 3 blinks means watchdog timer failure. Using caps lock key and getting a response means CIA and the CPU works. Technical specifications. OCS or ECS chipset. ECS revisions of the chipset made PAL NTSC mode switchable in software. Graphics can be of arbitrary dimensions, resolution and color depth, even on the same screen. Without using overscan, the graphics can be 320 or 640 pixels wide by 200/256 or 400/512 pixels tall. Planar graphics are used, with up to 5-bit planes. This allowed 2, 4, 8, 16 and 32 color screens, from a palette of 4096 colors. 2 special graphics modes were also included, Extra Half Bright, which used a 6-bit plane as a mask that halved the brightness of any color seen, and Hold and Modify, which allowed all 4096 colors on screen at once. Rhett Anderson developed the so-called Sliced Ham or Sham mode, which was based on Ham mode, but used the copper to reprogram the color palette registers at each scan line. The advantage of SHM files was the ability to display all 4096 colors while eliminating the color blur of Ham compression. Sound is for hardware mixed channels of 8-bit sound at up to 28 kHz. The hardware channels had independent volumes and sampling rates, and mixed down to 2 fully left and fully right stereo outputs. A software-controllable low-pass audio filter is also included. 512 kilobytes of chip RAM. Amiga OS 1.2 or 1.3, one double-density floppy disk drive is built in, which is completely programmable and thus can read 720 kilobytes IBM PC disks, 880 kilobytes standard Amiga disks, and up to 984 kilobytes with custom formatting. Uses 300 RPMs and 250 kbits. Built-in keyboard. A 2-button mouse is included. Graphics PAL mode, 320A, 256, 640A, 256, 640A, 512, 704A, 576 in overscan. NTSC mode, 320A, 200, 640A, 200, 640A, 400, 704A, 484 in overscan. Max 6bpp. The Amiga could show multiple resolution modes at the same time, splitting the screen vertically. An additional mode called Hold and Modify makes it possible to utilize 12 bpp over a 3 pixels wide span. This works by letting each pixel position used a previous RGB value and modify one of the red, green or blue values to a new 4-bit value. This will cause some negligible color artifacts however. Connectors 2 DE9M sockets for joysticks or mice, stereo audio, a floppy drive port, for daisy chaining up to 3 extra floppy disk drives via an EB23F connector, a standard RS-232 serial port, a parallel port, power inlet, analog RGB 50 Hz PAL and 60 Hz NTSC video output, provided on an Amiga-specific DB23M video connector. Can drive video with 15,750 Hz sync for standard Amiga video modes. This is not compatible with most VGA monitors. A multisync monitor is required for some higher resolutions. This connection can also be gen-locked to an external video signal. An RF adapter was frequently bundled with the machine to provide output on regular televisions or on composite monitors. A digital 16-color red-green-blue intensity signal is available too on the same connector. Monochrome video via an RCA connector, Zorro 2 bus expansion on the left side behind a plastic cover, trapdoor slot under the machine, for RAM expansion and real-time clock. Expansions expansion ports are limited to a side expansion port and a trapdoor expansion on the underside of the machine. The casing can also be opened up. All larger chips are socketed rather than being THSMD soldered directly to the motherboard, so they can be replaced by hand. The CPU can be upgraded to a Motorola 68010 directly or to a 68020, 68030 or 68040 via the side expansion slot or a CPU socket adapter board. The chip RAM can be upgraded to 1 MB directly on the motherboard, provided a Fat Annis chip is also installed to support it. Likewise, all the custom chips can be upgraded to the ECS chipset. The A500 Plus model instead allowed upgrading by 1 MB trapdoor chip RAM without clock, but there was no visible means on board to map any of this as fast, causing incompatibility with some stubbornly coded programs. There were modification instructions available for the A500 to solder or socket another 512 RAM on the board. then run extra address lines to the Trapdoor slot to accommodate an additional 1 MB of fast or chip RAM depending on the installed chipset. Up to 8 MB of a OE fast RAM can be added via the side expansion slot, even more if an accelerator with a non-EC processor and 32-bit RAM is used. Hard drive and other peripherals can be added via the side expansion slot. Several companies provided combined CPU, memory and hard drive upgrades, or provided chainable expansions that extended the bus as they were added, as there is only one side expansion slot. Expansions are configured automatically by autoconfig software, so multiple pieces of hardware did not conflict with each other. Memory map. Trapdoor expansion 501. A popular expansion for the Amiga 500 was the Amiga 501 circuit board that could be installed underneath the computer behind a plastic cover. It contains 512 kilobytes RAM configured by default as slow RAM, or Trapdoor RAM, and a battery-backed real-time clock. However, the RAM was pseudo-fast RAM, only accessible by the processor but still as slow as chip RAM. The motherboard can be modified to relocate the Trapdoor RAM to the chip memory pool, provided a compatible Agnes chip is fitted on the motherboard. Notable uses: Digital Hardcore Group EC80 recorded their premiere title album using only an Amiga 500 and a microphone. Scam Group Team Doyabai recorded their premiere album Cryptoburners using only an Amiga 500 and no microphone. Agrotech artist X Fusion also recorded music from 1989 to 1992 using an Amiga 500. 1. See also, Amiga models and variants, Minimig, FPGA implementation. References. External links, Amiga hardware Marumi 60 Amiga 500 photos, famous Amiga uses, Amiga crowdfunding campaign in Indiegogo.